Welcome to this MatchPal webinar on ERAS Decoded. This webinar covers updates to the ERAS application this year, maximizing interview yield with strategic program signaling, building your narrative in the experiences and hobby sections, and navigating red flags. We hope you enjoy.
Thanks everyone for joining ERAS Decoded 2026. This is always like one of our most popular events every year, kind of talking about all the parts of the application, all of the aspects of the experiences section and signal tokens, all the things that honestly a lot of schools really don't do a great job of covering. So that's what we're here for. And we have an awesome panel here to help us kind of discuss changes to the application process and strategies that every student really needs to be thinking about when they are building their application this fall. All right, so I think first, before we jump into it, I want everyone to meet the awesome residents that we have here. So I'm Dan. I'm a PGY5 resident. I'm an interventional radiology, and yeah, I've been doing this for doing interventional radiology for now almost 5 years, but doing MatchPal for way longer than that. And so, I've worked with a lot of students. I've seen a lot of applications, both through MatchPal and also through my own program. And I'm really excited to share all the insights that I've gathered today. And I have an awesome group of people to help me, because I don't want you to just hear my perspective. I want you to hear perspectives from a bunch of different people and a bunch of different specialties. So with me, we also have Ian. So I'll give Ian a chance to introduce himself too.
Hey everyone, I'm Ian. I'm a PGY4 diagnostic radiology resident in Wisconsin. Excited to be talking with y'all tonight.
Awesome. And we have Cortland as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cortland. I'm an anesthesia resident at the University of Oklahoma, and I will be starting my second year.
Amazing. And then what about Josh?
Hey everyone, I'm an IM resident, PGY2 upcoming over here in South Carolina.
Awesome. And then we have Aya.
Hi guys, I'm Aya. I'm a PGY2 almost dermatology resident. I'm really excited to be here. Let me know if you have any derm questions.
Amazing. All right, cool. So we can't do anything unless we understand some ground rules and some timelines. So I wanted everyone to just really understand what the road ahead looks like. So starting here in June, ERAS is open. So everyone here hopefully has access to what it looks like, what the application software is, what the types of questions you need to be answering, the documents you need to be uploading. And so if you haven't yet explored it, definitely take a second to just look at it. No rush, but just look at it and see what's expected of you. You have 90 days from now to submit the application, which I know sounds, I don't know, for some people, 90 days is like, holy cow, how's it 90 days? And for other people, it's like, 90 days, you got plenty of time. So however you want to take it, that's how you take it. But 90 days from now is when programs can start downloading applications, and you need to submit before September 23rd to be on time. Interviews are going to happen all the fall. It's actually pretty variable. I know some specialties have like a pretty unified interview date now. Some specialties just do it on a rolling basis. So that's kind of TBD and specialty specific, but you can expect for the most part, interviews happening all the way through even December. Honestly, I've heard of interviews being sent out, and we'll talk all about the strategy for interviews and scheduling them. But basically, that's a whole art in and of itself. Maybe best suited for a deep dive sometime in the fall for another event. And then in January is when you kind of finalize, talk about your rank list, sending your LOI, and then match is in March. So there's a long road ahead. But really, most of the work on your end as an applicant is front loaded to the next couple of months. And that's the thing I want everyone here to emphasize. Even though like match is like 9 months from now, really your job in preparing the application is 90 days at most from now. And everything else thereafter is really, just interviews and managing sub-Is and kind of, just kind of doing your fourth year rotations. And so with that, we're going to talk a lot in the beginning about the updates, because every single year ERAS changes a little bit. As just to show you how much has changed when I applied, and I think also when Ian applied, they didn't have signal tokens, right? And now every specialty has signal tokens, and there's all these different things that have happened. And so it's very important for the student, for you guys to be aware of how things change. And I think I wanted to start off with one of the biggest things, which is really the specialty specific questions. And I know we have Corlin here from anesthesia, so I wanted to kind of chat with us a little bit about what the specialty specific secondary essays are for the specialties that you guys see on the screen for anesthesia, neurosurgery, and plastic surgery, and how students should really start thinking about if they're interested in any of those fields about navigating those specific questions.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, anesthesia beta tested a different platform other than ERAS, and these questions actually came from that central app. So I had to do these. So the three questions are: describe a time you faced adversity and how you overcame it, and what lessons you learned from it. The second one is describe a situation in which you would have made a different decision that may have led to a better outcome. And the third is describe your ideal career as an attending. I think from an anesthesia standpoint and what I was taught when I was doing these questions is it doesn't matter what you write about. They're actually looking to see how you respond to them. They want to see like, did you, respond in a positive way to this? Did you take a bad situation and turn it into something good? Because that's really what they're really teasing out is how you respond to negative things and to hard days and hard events. So I think the biggest thing with especially the first two questions is keeping it more positive and not getting too dark in it. I saw some of my friends when we were doing it that they went to really dark places, which I think that can feel really dark and daunting to someone reading it. So I preferred the ones that stayed more positive. It really showed your qualities to overcome things. The third one, describing your ideal career, I think you can be pretty honest with that one. Anesthesia during interview season is pretty laid back. Once you actually get an interview from us, we just want to know you as a person, and we really like to see very honest answers, and we really like to see your personality. So if your ideal career as an attending is to work, 6 hours in the morning and then hit the golf course later in the afternoon, that's fine. When I did this one, I really described how I wanted a really nice work-life balance where I did work that I really loved, spent a long time there, and got great at my job, but also was able to go home and spend time with my family and travel. So that one's a good one to really think about what you want your lifestyle to look like, and does your lifestyle work with the specialty that you've picked? Is that a realistic goal for you? So
Yeah.
that's kind of my approach to them.
No, I think that's great. And I think everything that you just said is actually so fair game for interviews as well, right? So even if your specialty is not asking you this as a secondary essay, which again, only a few specialties are, this is all stuff that realistically you should reflect on at some point over the next few months because totally fair game to be asked about, your a bad day or a bad situation or your attending goals during a residency interview. It happens all the time. But thank you, Corlin. I think that's great. I think another thing, maybe if Josh, you want to talk about like interview scheduling. Did you use Thalamus when you applied? And if so, if you want to chat a little bit about the overall like interview process, because I think that's something that people should just be, I know it's not necessarily the focus of today, but I want everyone to have a little bit of insight onto it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did use Thalamus. It was, I think, the second year that Thalamus was out. And like everything in medical school, it's all front loaded. And so right when you get those interview notifications, you want to make sure you schedule your interviews as soon as possible. You want to have those phones on vibrate, Apple Watch is going, step out of rounds real quick. Everyone will understand and go ahead and schedule your interviews. It's always better to schedule earlier rather than later. Programs like to take a few from the early slots, and by the end of the interview season, they may only have a few spots left. So you definitely want to schedule early, be excited. For most specialties, you're aiming for around 10 to 12 interviews. For some, that's a lot. For some, that may not be enough. And so we'll talk more about how many applications to send later. This is a bit of an overview talk here. But when interview season comes, just be excited, be happy, use all that nervous energy to put your best foot forward and to schedule as many as you can.
100%. Thank you, Josh. All right, yeah, and I think there's a couple other updates that we'll just quickly touch upon, right? So I think another thing that there's an update for with anesthesia and plastic surgery was the program signal statements. So basically, the gist here is just there's going to be a quick blurb that you're going to have to include about why you're signaling a specific program. Okay, again, not applying to necessarily everyone here, only a small group of people for those specialties, but something to consider if you are applying for those. Um, and then I would say, the other ones are also like kind of one-offs, not really applying to everyone. They're on the screen here, and if you have questions about them, you can drop them in the chat. But I want to make sure we cover the things that do apply to everyone, and that's going to be program signaling. I think I want to get the perspective of Aya here first, because when you look at this list of the program signals, what stands out to me is the very big the variance, right? Some specialties like derm, they got 3 gold and 25 silver. They have 28 signal tokens in total. So, Aya, if you want to tell us a little bit about the strategy in general, gold versus silver, what do they mean for a derm applicant, let's say, and yeah, allocating gold versus silver, and like in general, like do people even get interviews if they don't signal in derm? Like, tell us a little bit more about your experience with that and what you've seen both in your own experience and in working with students.
Yeah, so I was the first year where they started doing this in dermatology. And I think it's also important to talk about how it lands as a DO as well, because the DO programs in dermatology are also very particular. When you look at these numbers, starting off the DO conversation, there aren't even 25 DO dermatology programs that are DO friendly, previously DO only. So when you're giving them the silver, you're pretty much telling them they're not your top 3, right? That's really just what you're doing. I think they understand that. They recognize that there's only 3 for dermatology. But when it's such a small field, they also all communicate. So these program directors really do in the DO world talk to each other, and they say, I'm really interested in Aya, but she gave us a silver. Like, I wonder where she put her gold. And so you really lose the anonymity of the ERAS cycle and like kind of what I think it was supposed to be with these signals, just honestly. One thing I would really pay attention to is a lot of attendings and program directors in my space actually don't even take them into consideration, which was very surprising to me. This was something that I put a ton of mental energy into. And the program that I matched into and really wanted to go to, they don't even look at the signals. Another program that I had allocated the gold to in my mind, they forgot to set up the signals my year. And even though they wanted to accept them, they didn't accept them. And so it's a lot of paperwork, I think, that goes into this. But, those are 2 signals that I had wanted to send to people, that one was wasted because I didn't know he wouldn't look at it until my interview with him later. And he said, I don't even look at that. And the other one, I told them I wanted to give you my gold, and they were like, okay. What I ended up doing, and you guys can steal this from me, is I got some Amazon stickers, and they were stars, and I gave it to her on my thank you note on my last day of my rotation because they didn't accept the signal. And I said, I hope you can accept this as my gold. So a little bit of laughs. But I think, when you have that many silver, I think it loses kind of the punch that I think that they're intended for, candidly.
Agreed.
Your top 3
Agreed.
derm are great. Those are obviously important. Make sure your program actually looks at it. I did rotate at several traditionally allopathic dermatology programs, and I think, again, it was kind of a mixed bag with the signals and the program directors. So I encourage you to reach out to residents in those programs and ask them, hey, does this doctor even look at the signals? Like, what do you guys take into consideration? Because they are valuable. So if I would have not wasted my gold signal on the program I did match into, not that it was ever a waste, but if I wouldn't have wasted it, I probably could have allocated it to another place. So just a lot of nuance there. And I actually don't foresee them being super valuable even in the next couple years, just because of those, this number allocation does not really make sense. You really shouldn't be applying to 25 other ones if you're doing a really focused,
Right.
rank list and everything. I don't think that's valuable anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. Does anyone else on the panel feel similarly or differently based on like your own experience or the special?
Yeah, if I could just comment, I feel like some general trends to give like general advice to everyone here. There's been a lot of really great med ed content producers on the internet. I don't know if you guys follow Sheriff of Sodium or Brian Carmody. He has kind of like looked at seeing like how different numbers of signals affect essentially interview yield across all the different specialties. Like the big rules are essentially if there's more signals, it's an application cap. If there's 15, 20, 30 signals, for the most part, unless it's one of those situations like I was referencing where the program just doesn't look at signals, the programs often are not going to be accepting you for an interview. So, kind of like an application cap, and it's brought those numbers down. And like orthopedic surgery, for example, the average number of applications has gone from like 80 down to 50, even including people who way over apply and bring that average up. So it has had that effect. If you have fewer signals, like let's say pediatrics, five, I mean, those five places, you're going to have a good chance at an interview, but that doesn't mean you should only apply to five programs. You probably still want more than five interviews at the end of the day. So, really small number, it's not really an application cap. It's a chance to genuinely say, this is where I want to go. Bigger number, it's kind of like, depending on the situation, it might be kind of an application cap. Look into kind of online forums, residents, like reach out to Aya, which programs didn't look at signals. You want to send them an application too, if you can find places like that, even if you don't signal. But otherwise, yeah, those are kind of the extremes, and somewhere in the middle, who even knows? 10 signals, that's pretty tough to say what the signal is going to do. But that's the way I generally think of it. Try to figure out if the programs you do away rotations at and your home program, if you have one, not everyone has a home program for the specialty they're applying for, but if the home program or the away programs want you to signal, or if you automatically get an interview from them, kind of from that experience.
Yeah, I think asking if you have that opportunity is very valuable because it can avoid that situation that I had mentioned, which is wasting or misusing a signal, however you want to call it. I have heard of students and programs, telling me basically like, we don't need this from you. You spent a month here rotating. No signal token can possibly be more of a signal than you spending a month here and being enthusiastic and wanting to do a great job. So definitely ask, don't be shy about that. And I think Ian hit the nail on the head with like the number, right? Smaller amount of signal tokens means it's like more of like a true signal. Larger amount, I agree, really kind of loses that of. And if you guys have signal, any questions about signal tokens or anything like that, you can, drop them in the chat or save them for the Q&A. But I want to move on because there's another type of signal that we got to worry about, and that's geographic signaling. Josh, you want to tell us about geo-signaling in general? Any strategies that maybe you use or you help, tell students to implement?
Yeah, absolutely. So geographic signaling, so there's different regions here in the US, and you can see whether that's, South Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, Midwest. There's a lot of different areas. And so on your application, you're able to denote three preference regions. And so this could be where you want to go, places where programs of your specialty are more likely concentrated, whether that's the Northeast, whether that's the Midwest. Or it could be where you consider yourself years down the line. I can see myself living in California. I want to get there, kind of deal. And so you have three distinct regions where you want to go. I think we talked about this before of if a program's not in your preferred region, sometimes it can be seen as I don't want to go there, And so you kind of have to play with the numbers of how can I get the maximum number of programs in these regions that I like. And so those are tough. You're gonna have to make some tough calls in terms of where you want to be living and training and signaling, because everyone interprets it a little bit differently. But all you can do is your best. There's another setting preference, whether that's urban, suburban, or rural. Be honest with yourself. If you've grown up in urban Chicago and you've done your training and let's say the suburbs or even rural, and you're like, yeah, I'd really rather get back to the city. Well, then just, make your setting as urban. It's fine. You'll find a program. This will be the next 3 to 5 years of your life. So let's try to find a place you're willing to live. We're all are going to work hard these next few years, but hopefully we can do it in a place where we enjoy. So that's something you definitely want to consider. So here it says 80% of programs use geographic preferences, meaning if the program you want to go to, your number one, is not in the geographic preference, that's probably a red flag. So make sure those all come together. We talked about this, be honest. They can detect inconsistencies with, let's say, you say, I'm good with anything, but your preferences are all Northeast, Midwest. It's like, well, you probably want an urban program, right? So just be honest with yourself. And then lastly, you're going to be living life here for the next 3 to 5 years, like I said before. And so consider cost of living. Consider, do you have a partner matching with you? Consider lifestyle as well. Maybe you don't like to drive and you'd rather do public transport. Urban might be perfect for you. And so a lot of these things you're going to have to figure out, where will I be happy? And if I'm happy, that means I can do a good job in my residency. And so this is a little bit tough to figure out where you're going to signal. I think the easiest way to do it is to go by programs and figure out where do they fit in the geographic regions and go from there.
Yeah, I think that was great. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I want people to remember is this is your life. You're spending 3 to 7 years here. This goes for geosignaling. This goes for just program list creation. You have the right to want to be in a place where you and your family and anyone else involved in this process with you is happy. Okay. You don't have to, I think a lot of times as a med student, it's very easy to fall into the mindset where it's like you feel like you're not enough. You feel like you're being judged. You feel like, you have to game the system in some way to get a better edge. But really, the best thing you could do is be honest with yourself and be honest on the application about what you're looking for, because that's going to end up in a better fit program for you. And guess what? Programs want happy residents. They want people who are going to come there, not cause problems, do a great job, not have issues with where they're living, or have, coming home to fights with their spouse because they're not happy living there. And then now they're like not doing a good job during the day. Like, no, nobody wants that in the workplace, right? And so this is, in my opinion, an excellent change that also didn't exist when I applied, because it allows another way to communicate those kinds of preferences to all of you, to all the applicants. And so take advantage of it. This is something that was never around a couple of years ago and is now here that you can use to make your outcome more favorable.
Really quickly,
All
I
right.
do just want to say I did hear specifically from a program director, not at the program where I ended up going to, but when I was on a rotation, it was the day that ERAS had released to them and they saw, and they were talking amongst themselves. It was the program director and the APD, and they were talking as a group with the residents and all of us very freely. And one thing that they said was, because dermatology is a lot of it's outpatient. He was like, I really don't want to get a lot of people who are signaling, on the other side of the country, because that means their Friday is going to be rushed. They're trying to catch a flight home. And so it even comes down to those little things that they're paying attention to and how they're interpreting these signals. So, they can't see exactly where else you signaled, and that's important. But it's important to say like why you have a preference for that area. So if it's where you're from, don't be afraid to say that in the little blurb, because they're looking to see that. They want to know where you have actual ties to.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of that. Thank you, Aya. All right, let's talk about the ERS experience section. This is like kind of like the main reason I feel like why we're here. I know there's so many other parts of the application. Um, this is another change that happened a couple years ago, where we saw the ERAS experiences section go from like a binder of like your whole life to just becoming 10 a 10 experience highlight reel, right? So before, you used to be able to submit all the things you ever did from, the time you were born all the way to the time you applied to residency. And thankfully, I think this is another very positive change that has happened over the years, that you now have a cap to just 10 experiences, right? These experiences can be really any type of experience. So this could be your traditional like leadership at a club at school, or some other local or national organization. This could be research, paid work. So if you do tutoring or you do some other job on the side, right? Paid work. This could be community service, right? So there's a wide range of different categories that the ERAS experiences section embodies. I think important to note is that the experiences section is distinct from the actual research section, right? So there's a whole other section where all you do is just submit your posters, publications, etc. And that's just like a CV entry, like, line items. You're not really talking about them. The experiences section is where you go into like what you did within a specific research lab, let's say, right? And I'm kind of focusing on research because I think that's a question that we get all the time, is like, how do I encompass the research that I did on both the research section and the experiences section? I think with the cap of 10, the main thing I want everyone here to take away is that the quality and the depth of the experience is the most important thing that matters, right? What we want to see when we're reviewing this is not something that you did for a month, and not even something that you did for a year, but didn't really have a significant impact on, right? That's not really impressive. Like being a member of a club for a year and just being a member and not really doing anything else within that role is not really impressive. However, if you were part of a club and you went from member to secretary to president and you drove all these major changes in the organization and you increased the, membership of that organization and you hosted events that were never hosted before and you brought in speakers that never happened before, that's awesome. Like that is an amazing thing to write about and to make sure that you let programs know about, because not that many people are able to do that. And so regardless of the type of experience, make sure that you are really thinking about, am I including this just because it's something that's on my CV and I'm just using it as a filler, or is this really something that I made an impact on, and as a result, it has made an impact on me, and then explain that, right? I also want to say that the specifics matter, right? And I know like kind of a lot of this comes back from like maybe even like med school applications where you have to like cite how many hours you did stuff, and we try not to be so focused on you know quantification metrics for residency applications as much. But I think if you have tangible outcomes, for example, if you have a research entry that says you're a part of a lab and this is the project, and then the outcome was that you presented it at this conference or you published it in this journal, like you want to include those things, right? Don't be shy to really showcase the work that you've done over the course of the last 3 years. Another question that I want to kind of get ahead of, because I always get this, is are experiences from before medical school okay? Right. And I know the panel, maybe you guys have different opinions on this, but my take, this is what I tell every student that I've worked with, is that I want you to focus on med school experiences for sure. If there is one or two things that happened before med school, whether it was undergrad or a gap year, that were really impactful, even if it's not medically related, but if it was really impactful, then I want you to absolutely be aware and include that for sure. Yeah, so I guess I would love to kind of kick it back to the panel. What are your thoughts on pre med school experiences and including them?
Yeah, I can talk about this a little bit. I included a pre-med school experience for myself. I worked at Chick-fil-A for like 7 years, and really enjoyed it. I love talking to people. It was, fast paced. We had a great environment. Also, there's a lot of leadership. And so did that for a long time, but I included it because of what it said about me, and I think a lot of these experiences you have to say, what do I want to convey about myself? Is it I'm a good leader? Is it time under pressure? I, rise above? Is it you include some cultural experiences because you want to say that I'm, well cultured and I'm able to adapt to different persons around you? Is it volunteering because you meet people where they are? So I do kind of think that you pick and choose your experiences to say what you want about yourself. Whether you're hardworking, you're flexible, you're creative, you're good under pressure. All of these experiences you pick will say something about you. If there is something before med school that you really identify with and was part of you, let's do it. But obviously, let's make most of it about what you did during med school and beyond. 100%.
The next thing I want to tell everyone about is choosing the three meaningful experiences. So this is another thing that's new. You have the not only the 10 experiences overall, but you also are getting the opportunity to add extra explanation and kind of, elements of your personality and the things that have formulated your experiences by denoting the three most meaningful. And maybe Corlin, you want to tell us like how did you choose your three most meaningful experiences? How do you guide students that are applying and doing the same thing? Because I think a lot of people get anxious about this stuff, and it is actually a really important aspect that I think anyone who's reviewing an application, they typically look at these first.
And so I kind of went about this section kind of similar to what Josh said. You can say anything about yourself, and you really want it to read as this story about yourself. So I took this section to be a little bit vulnerable when I really wanted to highlight things that I learned or things that I was really passionate about. Like, one thing that I talked about is I've been a tutor since I was in my early undergrad times, and I talked about really how that changed me as a person because I learned how to adapt to other people and to be able to kind of meet them where they are. And that taught me a lot. Another one I talked about was actually very vulnerable. I came from a place where I grew up where there was no homeless population at all. It was something that I was never familiar with. And then when I was in med school, I started working with the homeless population, and I was very honest. And I said that when I started, I was very uncomfortable with it. And I grew to really love this population and love working with them because I grew into this understanding, and now I work with that population a lot, and I think that I gained so much empathy and from that. And so I took it to really show things that changed me as a person or to highlight things that I really loved to do.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's great. I think this is an opportunity to show balance also. This is what I tell people, like, you don't want all three to be the same thing. You don't want all three of them to be like research only. You don't want all three of them to be service only. I think, you want to highlight three different but substantial experiences that come together to show you that you're like well-rounded, that you've had a rich background of a variety of different things. And again, unless you're the type of person that is like applying to neurosurgery at Ivy League schools, I mean, then maybe you want all three of them to be like Nature publications. Maybe that's a strategy, but I think for most people, that's probably not going to apply. Any considerations for derm or internal medicine?
I did it something very similar where I was trying to highlight three things that were completely opposite of each other. I really wanted to focus on the breadth of my personality. I think that in medicine, it's really easy to get this tunnel vision into like how much research, how much work, how much, everything else. One of my most meaningful experiences was before medical school. And it's kind of silly, but my Arabic professor in undergrad signed me up for something I had never been involved in before, but it was a pageant. It was called Miss Arab USA. And it was something that I was deeply embarrassed of, did not want to participate in, and was dreading the entire time. But she had signed me up and paid for it. And so it ended up being this road to service because I ended up winning it. And it was this experience where I really like exploded into this, my own culture that I didn't know a ton about, honestly, and the differences in the culture. And I talked about how that really changed me because it was this experience I was really not interested in at first that became this road to communicate with people and connect with people. And it had absolutely nothing to do with medicine or dermatology or anything like that. But that is what almost every single person in every single interview wanted to focus on. And so it's the little things that might be something that stands out to you that may not even be like that's not being in a pageant. I've never done anything like that since, and I'm not very passionate about that. But it was the thing, the tools that gave me were that it pushed me out of my comfort zone. I did something because somebody else had asked me to do it. It wasn't something that I had really wanted to do, but she had gone out of her way to do something that was important to her and paid for it with her own money to like enter me into this thing. So it was something that became very meaningful to me in my life and something that I'll always hold dear to me, but it kind of shows that growth. So those three things, like all of us have talked about three completely different things, right? Like Josh spoke about his work. We talked about our growth in these ways that are not necessarily things that you would immediately associate with personal growth, right? So how can you tell a story with these? This is a really important skill you have to develop and work with. But I saw a question about how do should it be like written kind of like a story? I think here it's very key to talk about how you've improved as a person. And I think the best way to do that is like kind of an emotional way versus just being like, did this, was fun, right? Like you have to make it meaningful. And that's what this gives you.
100%. And I think we're going to talk about hobbies in just a second, but I think this ties in with that as like it's the stuff that you might not feel as comfortable talking about and the thing that is a little bit off the beaten path, that isn't traditional, that's going to be interesting to the person on the other side of the table, right? When you read hundreds of applications, and I know some people on the panel may be a part of their programs committee, other people will be in the next year, right? But I can tell you this, I've been a part of my programs committee for multiple years now. You read all these applications, a lot of it really sounds exactly the same. Everyone's done a research project of some kind. Everyone's done something in their school's club and mentored some student at some point. It's all very, very similar. The things that are different is the stuff that catches your eye right away. And it's the first thing you want to ask an applicant about. So don't be shy to highlight those things, whether it's through your meaningful experiences, whether it's through the hobbies section, or whether it's through an impactful experience, which is a separate section that you can include something that was really impactful in your life. These are your opportunities to shine, right? This is how you want to be remembered. And it's about how you say it, both in the writing and then also in the interview, that ultimately determines how it lands with the person. But it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter basic experience for it to be impressive or memorable. And I think that's the main takeaway that I want everyone here to have. I know we talked about this earlier, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just for the programs that do require signal statements and specialty specific questions, just understand this. I'm just going to have one key takeaway. This is going to be one of the most important things that they look at, right? They want to know why the specialty and why the program. If they're taking the time to ask you to write additional responses, and again, this is only applying for a few specialties, but if they're asking you of this, this is probably where you want to spend the most amount of your time making sure that you're standing out. And so if you guys need help with this is this type of stuff that we do help students with, and we can talk about it at the end, but I want to just kind of hammer that home for anyone doing anesthesia or neurosurgery or plastic surgery this cycle. All right. This is something that we get a lot of questions about as well. And I think red flags come in a lot of different flavors and varieties, right? There's students who have issues with board exams, leaves of absence. Of course, if there's a disciplinary action, if you're reapplying, these are all things that you should face head on with honesty and with a growth mindset, and make sure that you use the space relevant to them, right? So whether it's for some of these, it might be the personal statement. For some of these, it might be the place where you have to write about an interruption in your training. And for others, it might just be something that you include elsewhere, depending on what it is, right? The bottom line is, if you have a true red flag, trying to hide it is not something that I think anybody recommends. And you also need to not be ashamed of it, right? Because the truth of the matter is there's like 40,000 people applying in the match every year. I would probably bet to say that at least 5 to 10% of them have some type of red flag or something on their application. So it's not that few, that's thousands of people, right? So keep that in mind. Don't be discouraged by it. There are people that match every year with these types of red flags. We see them, we've helped them. It's doable, but you have to navigate it with grace, and you have to make sure that you tell your story in a very correct way. There's a correct way to do this that makes it leave a positive impression rather than a negative one. And so, again, we can talk about this more offline, and you guys can, chat with us if you're in the situation and you need help, but just make sure that you do address your red flags head on. I don't know if anyone here had any specific things that they wanted to mention here, but I just wanted to kind of cover that real quick for anyone that it might apply to.
I think that you just have to be careful in the way you speak about things in this section, specifically that if a lot of times when people try to explain what happened, they try to look for reasons that this happened to them versus taking ownership of the situation. And it is crucial to figure out the verbiage here, to take responsibility and talk about how you played an action that caused this situation. A lot of people say, my family, this happened to me. And I'm sure all of those things did happen to you, but that can come across very whiny and can come across like you're not accepting the responsibility for what happened. And I think that that's very important to really think about the way you're going to write it, because people will make mistakes in life and in residency. But if you're going to be the person that refuses to acknowledge their part in anything, that's a red flag in it of itself. So how can you take ownership of that to be the kind of person that you want to be in residency with, right? That you want to have, that will take ownership of mistakes and things that you can improve on, because it can be a strength to figure out how to talk about it well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aya. All right. We kind of touched upon this earlier, and I'd love to hear from the panel about any specific hobbies that you talked about or that you've heard about that really stood out to you. I like to think of myself. I don't think I'm that particularly unique as far as like the things that I'm interested in. I think that the depth of my interests was what I used to stand out and to shine when I was going through this process, right? So instead of like, for example, one of the things that I personally do like to do is, and I actually included that example here at the bottom was I really like cycling. I love road cycling. Now I'm not a marathon, and I actually don't compete in races, but I talked about how many miles I completed in cycling across New York City and my favorite places to go. And I wrote all of that out in like a very brief sentence. I talked about, playing ping pong with my dad because that's the sport that he played growing up. I think adding, the actual hobby and then adding the kind of an additional element to it that makes it a little bit more personal and a little bit more memorable was kind of the approach that I had as someone who is not particularly into anything super niche or unique. Now, that being said, I've seen people like faculty and PDs straight up like gravitate like a magnet to people who they happen to interview that have a similar interest. And that could be anything. Like I think the thing that a lot of med students forget, and I'm going to remind you guys right now, and you probably will forget by the time you're in interviews, but here, you heard it here first. The people interviewing you are people too. They're into very, we're all people, we're all in medicine, we all are into very similar things a lot of the time. But there are people that are into fitness, there are people that are into gaming, there are people that are into certain movies or reading certain types of literature. There are people that are into all these interests that you probably have. Be kind of open and honest and share those things. And you'll be surprised as to how many people will open the interview with like, tell me about yourself. And then, oh, I saw you're interested in this. Tell me about it. Right. So for sure, don't leave this blank. But also, like, forget about leaving it blank because I don't think people will do that. Like, this is a huge asset that I think people don't even realize how important it is. But I'm gonna, kick it to others to kind of see what they have to say about, writing about it or anything that they've seen or they included in their own application.
Yeah, I'll just say that I really like the advice there on what to include in avoiding generic entries. I think that's like so key. If you give the interviewer something to like stick on to, like it's not just another person who says they do hiking. They hiked this specific place, which I'm familiar with. I'm going to remember that and be able to ask them about. They read this specific book. Just there's so many ways to give them something to remember you by, which ultimately at the end of the day is kind of what the interview is about. Are you like someone who is memorable in a good way, and they think is going to fit into their program? I actually kind of had a question, Dan. So a lot of people are like talking about a lot of these like personal things. People have brought up being a parent, kind of like struggling with different like interpersonal things. I don't know. I think generally I probably would avoid putting some of those things in the application in general, some of these more interpersonal things. I don't think hobbies is necessarily the solution for it, but do you have any insight? Just because I think I've taken like 5 questions on that now, like on any of these interpersonal relationship things. Would you put them in hobbies? Would you put them in experiences, or do you think you would leave them out of the app?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think that it really depends on what it is that you're
Yeah,
talking about. Now, I don't know if I would include a whole experience section. I have seen people do it.
yeah,
I just don't know if I would do it personally
yeah,
about being like a father or a mother as a
yeah,
medical student. I actually looked at the statistic the other day because I was talking to a student who was writing about this. Actually, like less than 10% of medical students are parents, right? So if that applies to you. That's a pretty rare, like you're a part of a pretty small subset of people. And so I have seen people actually take a whole experience entry and just write about being a parent and juggling it and what they learned. And I think if you write that really well, it can land very nicely. I think on the other side, I also don't think something like a interpersonal stuff is technically a hobby, right? So
yeah.
I mean, I think that the personal statement is ultimately where I land as that the perfect place to
Mhm.
talk about these kinds of
Yeah.
things, right? Personal statement, it's part of your story, it's part of who you are. Weave it into why you chose the specialty, weave it into why it's going to make you a better resident. But I don't know if it's necessarily going to fit super nicely into the hobbies or experiences section. I don't know if Corlin or Josh, you want to add anything about specifically about hobbies.
So when I was on doing all of my interviews, this is where most of my questions came from. I can't really speak for other specialties, but for anesthesia and all the places that I interviewed at, they were very laid back and they just wanted to know what your interests were. And it looked like most of the time my interviewers found something that they also did or could kind of talk about. And that's what we would talk about the whole entire time. There was one time that I talked about Peloton cycling and my favorite like teachers. And there was one that I talked about banana bread baking and different ways we do things. So, but that's where our majority of all of my questions came from. And I think you can kind of just list them. They don't give you, you don't get a lot of space to talk about your hobbies. So I kind of would just list them out. And then when they asked me about it, that's when I would really go into more detail.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I echo the same thing for IM. They asked us all about our hobbies. Road tripping and traveling was one of mine, and that led to a lot of different conversations. So can't go wrong with traveling if you've been to some pretty cool places.
Yeah. Fun fact, Josh opened up his match day email on an airplane. So he loves traveling.
For sure. I was out. I was out.
All right, cool. If we have, I know we have some, we have some time for a Q and A as well. So if you guys want to ask more about that, we can get into that later as well. So last but not least, let's talk about other things besides the actual experiences, hobbies, and personal statement, right? Make sure that you have transcripts ready to go. These are going to be sent directly from the exam entities, right? Whether it's USL Complex, NBME, NBOME, they need to upload it to ERAS, but you have to request it. Your application is technically not complete without it. I have seen students be delayed and not be able to submit on time because they didn't do this. So make sure you do that. MSP is your school, right? They also submit your transcript. Unfortunately, I've also seen schools not do this on time or do this like at the last minute. It's on you to hound them to make sure that it's submitted on time. And obviously, if they need your help with anything, make sure that you're answering those emails and edits and doing those conversations in a timely fashion so that it's not delayed. And then, of course, letters of recommendation, which is, I think we can talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. My piece of advice always, especially for radiology and IR, ideally, you always want to see at least two specialty specific letters. And I actually do think this translates across the board to almost every other specialty. You remember, you can submit up to 4 letters per program, and you can aggregate as many letters as you want. I mean, you can theoretically get 10 letters and then mix and match which program gets which letters. And there actually is a little bit of strategy to that that we can talk about offline for anyone interested. But most people are probably not going to get 10 letters of recommendation. They're going to get 3 or 4 and submit the same 3 or 4 to every single program. And so just make sure that, ideally you want 2 or more of them to be specialty specific. A classic question that I always get is, can I submit a letter of recommendation that is not clinical, right? Whether that's a leadership supervisor, a research PI, someone who is not watching you in the clinical setting, but can really comment in depth about your character, your work ethic, your involvement, etc. The answer, I think, is yes. I think one letter from, if it's extremely strong, is totally fine from a person like that. Not more, and it's certainly not mandatory, right? But I think it's something that everyone here can consider. Now, ideally, if you can stack the letter in your favor for it to be someone who like you did research or a leadership thing with, and then also rotated clinically with, I think that's going to be the most powerful thing. But I also know that's not going to be necessarily something that every single person is going to be able to have, right? And I think you guys can chime in here if anyone has anything else to kind of add, but who you ask is like really the most important thing. I think a lot of people like to try to cherry pick people with fancy titles. And I'm not saying that's a wrong approach, but I'm just saying that someone with a fancy title who writes you a weak letter is usually not going to be better for you than someone who is a brand new faculty member who writes you an excellent letter that is actually, unique to you and is not generic and comments on your strengths in a way that's very, very compelling. But yeah, anyone else have anything to add about the other documents or letters of rec or anything that you've heard or seen in kind of your experience in working with students?
One of my really good friend, she was a reapplicant for dermatology, and one of the feedback that she got was that she had a letter of recommendation that was given to her by somebody that she was actually quite close with, but who had kind of a negative reputation in the space. So there was really no way of her knowing that prior to that, receiving that feedback. But it's just something interesting to focus on and think about. There's a lot of interpersonal things, I think, in dermatology, because it is a little bit more of like a smaller specialty when it comes to that stuff. But these can hurt you in ways that you really don't anticipate. So just be cautious and careful. I think the best piece of advice is what you said. It's that a letter that's really speaking to you is going to be so much more valuable than some name that's very generic. And I've seen so many people even just get thrown out of the audition, request page because they're like, this looks like the letter I just read. And they don't even finish reading the letter because they're like, this is so clearly like ChatGPT or something super generic. So you
Yep.
want somebody who knows you and cares to put the time into it first and
Yeah.
foremost.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, AI generated letters leave a really bad taste in people's mouth. I mean, AI generate anything, even like your experiences, entries, your personal statement. Like this is it's so obvious to tell. So don't do it because people can tell right away. And then yeah, I've heard of the letter writer laziness phenomena is shocking to me because I think it's really unfortunate because we don't get to see the letters, right? The letters are submitted on your behalf and they're secure. You can't see your letter of rec. And so you actually don't know this until you hear about it through the grapevine. But I've heard of people not putting the right specialty, not putting the right name of people on the letter, like crazy stuff, and like that burns you because the impression that leaves on me as the person reading it is that this person doesn't actually know or care about you. You ask them for a letter, you may have rotated with them, maybe you didn't, who knows at this point, and they clearly don't care enough to proofread it to write you a letter. Even if what it says is good, those kinds of errors, they kind of make everything go out the window. So make sure that whoever you're asking, you trust that they're doing this. They're writing a letter for you, the type of letter that they would want written for themselves, right? And I think that's it's a scary thing to think about, getting burned like that, but it happens. Unfortunately, it happens every single year. All right, I think we're kind of running out of time here, so we're going to chat really quickly about program lists. Last thing, we're going to talk about, again, we talked about signals being potentially a cap. We talked about the fact that, for some specialties, you're going to have a list that goes beyond the signals. And I think what we have on the slide here talks about both. It applies to the program list as a whole as well as signals. So it kind of overlaps, right? I always tell students, do not overextend your reach programs, and also don't be so safety heavy. So like 25, 50, 25, those are the percentages. 25% reach, 25% safety, 50% target, right? I think a really powerful resource for picking programs is where your school has matched in the past and where you want to go. That's the intersection. You want to live at that intersection, is like places that have taken students from your school and places that are you and family, if you're bringing a person, significant other or family with you, are going to be happy living in, right? I want every student to like recognize that again, this is one of those places where you get to dictate how your life pans out, right? Like you don't need to apply to a program in the middle of nowhere, quote unquote, unless you want to be in the middle of nowhere, right? You don't have to do that just to maximize your chances, because again, you're going to end up in a situation where you almost wish you didn't have to spend 3 to 7 years there, potentially, right? So be careful with that, and also be honest with yourself. Am I actually competitive? Like there's a ton of data through Residency Explorer and Texas Star and other databases out there about programs, scores that they look for, types of applicants. Obviously, every program has a website that you can look at, where are the residents coming from, what type of programs they come from. I mean, you're not going to necessarily see their USMLE score, but you'll see at least the general gist of like, is this a type of program that is going to take the type of applicant that I am? And I think I encourage everyone here to do that research. It's worth the time because it saves you money in applying to programs, and it saves you the kind of sore feeling of not getting interview invites from places that you spent money and time applying to, which I think is really important as well. Anyone else have any other specific kind of strategies or insights specifically about the program creation, the list creation? I know we covered a lot of this earlier, so I probably not, but yeah. All right. So, everyone here is part of MatchPal, and like this is this kind of stuff that we do, and I'm really happy that everyone here was able to attend. Everyone on the panel here has like worked with countless students. I mean, as a team, we worked with like over 1,000 students over the years, and what we do is just really help students in a personalized way to make sure that their application and their interview skills is all at a level that exceeds what the average student is putting forth because they don't have someone reviewing their stuff with them and building that story for them as far as all the things that we talked about, right? So all the strategies for personal statements, for the ERAS entries, everyone here is actively involved in doing like line by line edits and providing feedback personalized to you guys. And yeah, I mean, we've had awesome success in doing that over the years. I think, right now we have we are giving everyone here the opportunity to chat with us for free to kind of learn more about what working with the team would look like. There's a discount code here that everyone can also take down. If you guys are looking for personal statement edits or mock interviews down the road or kind of help with the whole process, this is all stuff that we do. And, you're able to kind of use, scan the QR code, or Ian is going to also send the link in the chat as well if that's easier for you to set up a time to chat with someone from our team and kind of learn more about working with someone from the panel or anyone else from the team. And we have like over 80 advisors and people in every single specialty. So depending on what you're going for, we definitely have someone for you. But yeah, I want to just thank the panel. This was awesome. I think this is a great, very informative talk. And thanks everyone for joining. And if you guys have any other questions, we'll kind of keep Q&A open for another minute or two here as we wrap up. But yeah, I think this was great. So thank you to the panelists.